Gentlemen, it's official. We're old.
Yeah.
These right here are memories to me. Part of my childhood.
Oh, gee whiz.
What?
You had to bust out the GameCube?
Here, I'll trade you.
I mean, like, the 64 I can understand. This...
What?
You don't think the GameCube is retro?
I don't know. Is there a definition of retro? Like, if you're a classic...
There is actually, and I have really bad news for you. The Xbox 360 and PS3 are considered retro.
PS3 is considered retro?
Yeah.
I know a classic's older than 25 years. Is classic and retro the same thing?
I guess. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the legal definition of it is, but this, you know,
find out.
This is considered retro or classic at this point. I also have this awesome thing on the back of it. This is the Eon GameCube HD modifier. It actually uses the component cable thing and outputs a HDMI signal.
Yeah, retro is considered things that are 15 to 20 years old at least. The PlayStation 3 is nearly 20 years old. It will be in 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's so depressing.
I know. We're
You
going to
have
die any day now of old age and natural causes.
I was going to say,
If you're over 30, are you double retro?
I mean, technically we would all be double
I think
retro
we're
if that were the
classic
case.
at this point.
Oh yeah, I'm cool with being a classic because, in all honesty, classics, they stand the test of time. Retro games are part of our childhood. I mean, I know we look back on like NES, SNES, GameCube, or N64, PlayStation, Sega Genesis. For you, what is your go-to retro console?
I guess it'd be the Super.
It used to be the Super Nintendo, but now it's probably the PlayStation 2.
I would probably say for me, probably the SNES as well. I remembered, here's the thing, my grandparents on my dad's side had the NES in the basement, and I was the first one anyone in my family knew of that beat Super Mario Brothers 3. And I remember when I did it, everyone was like jumping up and down, like super happy that I beat it. And then, of course, there was also on the SNES, when Super Mario World came out, I couldn't stop playing it at all. Like, I was just like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, it's so awesome.
Which I have played Super Metroid through probably more times than any other video game.
Super Metroid's a good one. F-Zero was another one that I had a lot of fond memories of. Donkey Kong Country 1 and 2.
Link to the Past.
Link to the Past also. Star Fox. Super Mario All-Stars. Turtles in Time.
That's what Turtles in Time and Zombies Ate My Neighbors.
Yes! And I got a copy of Turtles in Time up there on the retro shelf. Oh, yeah.
Kirby Superstar.
Oh, man. Kirby Superstar was another one. Retro Bird is going to be regaling us on which games should be considered retro. Let's check it out and let's feel old together.
All right, so we've got some serious business to cover here, and don't get any funny ideas about what's retro and what's not. You see, we retro gamers take what qualifies as retro very seriously. Why? Well, we like to know what it is that we like. If I'm a retro gamer, does that mean PS2 is part of the equation, or is the cutoff at Dreamcast? It's only natural that we'd want to define exactly what our hobby is, and it's also only natural that nobody agrees. Some people say something becomes retro after a certain number of years pass, while others say that it has more to do with the advancement of technology, aesthetic, and visual differences. Perhaps the difference between 2D and 3D with a cutoff after a specific console. And
I love that those dudes just jump in the water.
Who say something can only be retro if they played it as a little kid. Sorry, but calling the Wii retro makes some of us feel like mega geezers. And then there are what I like to call the dictionary people. Those who have read the dictionary definition, which technically states that retro video games are, well, actually, not the older video games themselves, but rather newer video games that imitate older games. The issue with that is the meaning of words are not concrete. Language is fluid and ever-changing. Meanings get appropriated to mean different things based on how people are using the words, something that's been happening for literally all of time.
Yeah.
And in the case of the word retro, the term has been appropriated by our community to include the actual older video games themselves. You want another fun example? The word awful at one point referred to something that was worthy of awe, like an awful bunch bunch of bananas. Something I'd never say nowadays. In any case, the entire point of language is to communicate meaning. So when I say Contra is a retro video game, everyone knows what I'm saying. But what about Metal Gear Solid 3? Things get a lot more divisive in terms of who does and does not think it's retro. If we were to approach it with the "a game is retro once it's a certain number of years old" logic, it would be just shy of 20 years old, a common cutoff I see people give for when a game becomes retro, and in which case,
so even this video is actually older itself, isn't it?
40,000.
When did this video come out?
3 days ago.
How is Metal Gear Solid 3 just shy of 20 years old when the PlayStation 3 is just shy of 20 years old?
Well, Metal Gear Solid 3 was on the PlayStation 2.
Yeah, I know. So it should be 20 years old or more by now.
I was in Dawn of War. You're now a retro game. Released exactly 20 years ago on the same day as this video upload. Of course, even among the "a game needs to be old enough to be retro" folks, the cutoff for how many years old a game needs to be will vary. Some will suggest even more than 20 years, but like I said, a lot of people will say 20 years. Some will say 15 years, and people who are really frisky might even try to say 10 years. But these days, almost
no need for
never
that.
will you see anything less than that. But if you did, who's gonna stop you? In any case, the logic behind a game needing to be a certain number of years old comes from very sound reasoning. If a game is considered retro once it's older, then it needs to have a certain amount of oldness. So, simple solution for many folks is to just say this happens after a finite number of years. However, where I personally find myself disagreeing with this logic is that not all decades are created equal, and not in a pro-70s disco type of way. Think about what happened with video games during the 90s. At the beginning, we were finishing up with the NES, and at the end, we were getting ready for the PlayStation 2. And awkwardly enough, some people think Dreamcast games can look better than PS2 anyways. Then contrast that with the 2010s. We went through an entire decade without getting a slightly upgraded port of the original Red Dead Redemption. Though, to be fair, in a recent 10-year span, we did get Last of Us upgraded twice. Regardless, when thinking about what is and isn't considered retro, I do think the context of what happened during the years that have passed can be more significant than the mere fact that years have passed. If you think back to the late 90s, or if you weren't born till after, shout out to you, younger generation caring about retro games, you can take my word for it that the NES was considered old by the late 90s, despite having been supported with new games less than a decade before. The push for 3D came along, and in the eyes of a lot of people, made something like the NES feel so different, so outdated, so old. Thinking about video games in these terms, it's easy to see why people would think of retro video games as having a cutoff related to a specific console. The Dreamcast seems to be a popular choice among people. Diminishing returns does start to become a factor where we can only try to improve the visuals so much compared to what came before, and no matter how much we boost the fidelity of newer games, they're still gonna feel somewhat close to PS4 and heck, maybe even PS3 games for some people. I think this is why when a lot of people think of video games that are retro, they think of games that are 2D or maybe also include more rudimentary looking 3D as well. Of course, there are many other factors to consider that came as video game consoles have changed over the years as well, including, but not limited to, the controllers we use, the different genres of games that are emphasized, the approach to game design, the way online connectivity affects consoles, and perhaps even just the overall effect of the video game market having grown so much, making more recent consoles feel more like generic mass market boxes. There are people who will tell you that if you ignore Nintendo systems, game consoles haven't had a personality since the Dreamcast. PS5 might beg to disagree, but that sentiment is certainly out there. All that said, while some like to discern what is and is not retro based on the age of the consoles, there are those who like to base it on the age of themselves. People from younger generations might consider something like the PS3 retro because they played it when they were kids, which for them could feel like a long time ago, as opposed to someone older who might think, oh yeah, I remember when I played the PS3. I played that when I was old. Something else I've noticed when it comes to decide.
When I was in college, the PlayStation 3 was just coming out. There was actually a dude who got his hands on like 12 PlayStation 3s, and he was selling them for like double the price of what he bought them for. He was a scalper. And I literally asked, I was like, dude, there's no way you have like 12 PS3s. And he's like, you want to see it? He takes me to his
dorm.
No, he takes me to the back of his car, and he pops his trunk. Sure enough, right there. I was like, how much for one? He's like, normally I do like 800, but since you're cool, I'll do 700. I'm like, I can't afford that, dude. I couldn't afford that shit.
Deciding what is and isn't retro is that people don't really care what other people think, not unlike plenty of other things. One of my favorite examples, though, is when people create their cutoff for what is and isn't retro based simply on what they like. Like, I don't really play anything newer than the Dreamcast anyways, so that works as a good cutoff for me. And sure, this preference might happen to coincide with other logic they have, but either way, the influence is certainly there for some people. But now that we've had an entire discussion about what is and isn't retro, I find now is a good opportunity to remind everyone that this is a conversation mostly for the sake of fun anyways. Not a lot riding on it, and you probably won't change anyone's mind anyway. So don't get worked up in the comments. You'll find it's not very productive. You want something more productive? Try this. And like I talked about before, some people don't even make the distinction between what is and isn't retro anyways. They just play video games. Something that could potentially be beneficial to the hobby, because as much as some of us use the label of games being retro as a plus, unfortunately, others use it as a way to think of them as lesser. You know, folks who will say they don't like retro games. I can live with that. I mean, different strokes for different folks, am I right? That said, I would still be curious to hear what all of you consider to be retro. For questions like these, I always enjoy looking for trends among your answers to see where people are agreeing and disagreeing.
So with that, leave your comment down below, and I will see ya
in the next video.
Don't like anime. It's just like, dude, anime encompasses so many different genres. You've probably just not seen one you like yet.
Yeah, I remember
retro games encompass so many different wide arrays of like levels of quality and control types and genres and stuff. You probably just not played one you liked.
The thing is with retro stuff, I think that people are just, they look at it and they're like, ooh, whereas they look at modern games and they're given what these game developers put out there and these studios put out there, and that's what they expect video games to be. Whereas when they go back and they're just like, wait, where's the online play?
You have to use your hands? It's like a baby's toy.
Oh, Caleb.
Uh-oh.
Yeah,
We're going rogue.
Thor's about to make you feel really, really old.
Oh, no.
I know exactly which clip he's pulling up.
This is going to make all of you age 50 years. You ready for this?
No.
So we had a setup that was like this. We had a desk, and it had 2 stations on it. And we had a keyboard for this one, mouse and keyboard, and we had a controller on this one. Not a single kid that came up could use that mouse and keyboard. Some of them, their hands were too small. Some of them never seen a keyboard before in their life. And I was like, oh man, like, we got to go buy another controller for the next day, like, because it's a 3-day con, you know. So we bought another controller, and we got rid of the keyboard. So we had controller and we had controller, right? Because they're smaller. The kids' hands can work on them. So kids walk up. 50%, half of the children that came up moved the controller to the side, not knowing what it was, reached out and tried to touch the monitor because they had never played a game outside of on a phone or a tablet and thought it was a touchscreen. The next generation doesn't know what a controller is. This
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah, that's where we're at with kids.
I'm old. Break me my Metamucil.
I just bought a new bed frame today.
Oh, yeah.
It's adjustable, so I can sleep in 0G.
There you go. God,
It
dude.
kind of hits home because I heard a joke. It was on it's either Whose Line or the Drew Carey show. I think it was the Drew Carey show. Drew Carey was dating like an older lady,
Yeah.
and one of his buddies is like, "You're supposed to rob cradles, not Craftmatic adjustable beds."
Oh my gosh. This hurt me so bad when I first saw it. I literally just sat there and I was just like, 36. I am old and I hate it. Ugh.
Back when I first played video games, it had one fucking button.
Our parents.
Would you
used to
play
talk
the
about
Atari
Pong.
2600?
Yep. So I actually played the NES first, but my mom was like, "Oh yeah, your sister has a game console if you like these video game things," and I was like, "Yeah, I'll check it out." And it was an Atari 2600.
Oh my gosh.
I played Pitfall and a bunch of other stuff on it.
Jeez, dude.
I was like, "It only has one button." I was like, "It's still pretty cool though."
Oh yeah. Yeah. Feel old yet? Huh?
I always remember that sound from Pitfall.
Baron Land. Alright. Well, I think it's time for us to move on from this. I feel old enough. I don't need the internet making me feel even older. So, here we go, and that's all there is to say. Check out more from Retrobird if you want to see more from Retrobird. So, until next time, I'm Nate.
I'm Caleb.
I am Nick.
Be good people. Take care.